Magnus Carlsen checkmating Alireza Firouzja in one of the craziest attacking games you will see all year. What more could you ask for? Alright, in the game, Magnus Carlsen opens 1e4, best by test, and his opponent, Alireza Firouzja, responds 1c5, the Sicilian Defense. And of course, this game just took place on chess.com as a training blitz match. Now from here, Magnus, knight to c3, knight c6, and Magnus mixes things up with the move bishop b5. Now this move bishop b5, very interesting, sort of a modified version of a Rosalimo. Typically you have the knight on f3 instead of c3, but Magnus mixing things up in this game. Now from here, knight d4, the best move, getting the knight away from the attack of the bishop, and given the question to a white, what do you do about the bishop on b5? Well, from here, Magnus knight to f3, allowing black to take it. However, that is not a very good move. For example, if black goes knight takes b5, white responds knight takes b5, and from here, Magnus simply goes d4 with a very big lead in development. Literally all of black's pieces are on the back rank here. Now instead, after knight f3 from Magnus, a6 on the board, and Magnus retreats his bishop to the best square, bishop d3. Now from here, for black, knight takes d4 is not a very big threat. If white does that, black's going to respond c takes d4, hitting the knight on the c3 square, forcing it back to e2, and black's going to have a perfectly fine game. So with that in mind, the main question for black here is, how do you develop the kingside egg, get your king castled to safety? Well, as is typical in the Sicilian, the big question is, where does the bishop on f8 go? Are you going to go g6, following up bishop g7, or do you want to go e6 or e5? Well, it turns out all three moves are playable. For example, right away, g6 is good, e6 is good for black, and black even has the option of going knight to c6, and then following up with the move e5 in the spirit of the Sveshnikov Sicilian. However, instead of that, in the game, Alireza plays the move g6, simply intending bishop g7 next. Very, very solid idea. Now from here, Magnus, what is he supposed to do? Well, he has two main choices. The first one is simply to go castles and then follow up with the move rook e1, very standard Rosalimo stuff. However, fortunately for us, Magnus Carlsen, in this position, he goes for the more combative move. He takes the knight on the d4 square, knight takes d4, then c takes, and knight to e2. Here, the knight is kind of awkwardly placed, but it does put pressure on the pawn on the d4 square, and white can always follow up with c3, trying to give black a question, what do you do about the pawn? Now here, Alireza once again has a big choice. Do you simply go bishop g7, intending e5, trying to clamp down in the center, or do you go for the more combative move, which he did in the game, d5? Here, black immediately blows open the center, opens the lines for the bishop on c8, and from here, the game very, very quickly gets absolutely crazy. Here, Magnus e5, trying to keep some tension in the center, keeping the pawn alive. Now Alireza, bishop g7, threatening the pawn on the e5 square. Now here, white can follow up with the move f4, trying to bolster the e5 pawn. However, black has the Ben Feingold counterattack with the move f6. Of course, f6 is Ben Feingold's favorite move in the world. Just ask him yourself if you don't believe me. And here, black's going to get a great game, simply taking on the e5 square and then threatening bishop takes e5 after that. So with that in mind, here on move 9, Magnus knight takes d4, and Alireza Firouzja responds bishop takes e5. And don't worry, we're about to get to that crazy position you saw in the intro. Don't worry, I got you covered. Now here, Magnus knight to f3, retrieving the knight away from the attack and attacking the bishop himself. Alireza bishop g7, solid move. Here, Magnus castles, and this is where the game explodes. Alireza Firouzja e5, excellent move, taking control of the center, and more importantly, immediately threatening that move e4, ganging up on the bishop and the knight. Here, Magnus has to do something immediately. Now here, Magnus, what are you supposed to do against that threat of e4 breaking in the center? Well, if your name is literally Stockfish, you're going to want to do the move bishop to e2, simply retreating. The idea is after black gains more space with the best move e4, you simply retreat the knight to the e1 square, then you plan on counterattacking with the move d3, try to attack those pawns in the center. Yes, black is still better with that powerful bishop on the long diagonal, but you're still doing relatively okay here as white. However, fortunately, Magnus Carlsen is not Stockfish. His name is not Hans Niemann either, and he goes for a very interesting human-looking move. Knight takes e5. Boom, just grabbing that pawn in the center. And by the way, Hans Niemann, that was just a joke. I still love you. You're still my favorite chess player. Now, what the heck is the idea from Magnus? Did he just give up a knight in the middle of the board? Well, the answer is sort of. Here, black obviously goes bishop takes e5, but then Then Magnus shows his idea. He goes rook to e1. The idea is the rook simply piles up on that bishop, pinning it to the king, and the bishop can now not legally move. All right, what is black supposed to do here? Well, the obvious move is going to be the Ben Feingold counterattack with the move f6. Then Magnus simply goes f4, and Magnus has a great game. Of course, that bishop still being pinned to the king by the rook on e1, and that means f takes e5 is coming next. However, instead of that, here Firouzja played perhaps the better move, but it looks absolutely terrifying for black. Queen to e7. Oh my goodness, Firouzja literally willingly lines up the queen and the king with the rook on the e1 square to try and save the bishop. However, it gets even crazier. In many lines, black here is threatening the move bishop takes h2, winning the rook on the e1 square. So for example, real fast, if white makes a fatal mistake, queen to f3, decent looking idea, then immediately bishop takes h2, wins on the spot. From there, it's king takes and then queen takes e1. Black is up a rook and a pawn. Oh my goodness, that is too much. So going back, what the heck is white supposed to do here? Well, the move f4 doesn't work either. Here, black has the incredible shot, bishop d4. Oh my goodness, what's the idea? Well, after king to h1, that move is forced. Then black simply goes bishop to e6. And from here, remember, black is still up an entire knight, and there's no way for white to win back the piece. Those bishops on e6 and d4 are perfectly defended. Okay, with that in mind, if the move f4 is not the way to go, then what the heck is white supposed to do here? Well, the best move is simply king to h1. This move gets out of the way of those bishop takes h2 threats and the bishop d4 check threats after white goes f2 to f4. And of course, from there, white can simply threaten f4, trying to win back the bishop and have a great game. Now, of course, Magnus didn't play that. He played a much more exciting move for us as the spectators. Here, he goes bishop to f1. Now, very logical looking move. The idea, of course, he wants to go d4 next, once again winning the bishop. And if black allows that, white's going to have a terrific game. However, does black allow that in the game? No, he goes for the move I showed you in the intro. Yes, that's right. The brilliant move, bishop to g4. Oh my goodness, what the heck is the idea of this move? Well, it's very simple. It's a deflection of the queen away from the defense of the rook on the e1 square. Okay, this move is so critical. Let's see what white can do here. Well, first of all, the obvious move f3, the reverse Ben Feingold counterattack, trying to block the bishop. Here, that move is simply no good because of the idea bishop d4, king h1, then bishop e6, and once again, black is simply up a piece. Okay, that doesn't work. What about simply blocking the check with the move bishop to e2? Does that work? Well, no. The bishop just retreats, bishop e6, and once again, black is simply up a piece. Okay, with that in mind, what the heck is white supposed to do? Well, it turns out the only move is going into the eye of the storm. That's right, you have to eat that bishop. Queen takes g4, and that means black gets to play his combination. Bishop takes h2, throwing open that line of the queen to the rook, then king takes and queen takes, and oh my goodness, we get an absolutely insane position. Both of the kings are exposed here, and black is literally up the exchange. He has the rook against the bishop from white. Yes, white does have the bishop pair. That helps a little bit, and maybe white can get some attacking chances here. However, overall, black here clearly better, but bottom line, this is a wild position. It only gets crazier from here. All right, now Magnus, he turns up the heat. Queen a4 check, hitting the king, then king to f8, and queen to d4, opening up the attack on the rook on the h8 square. Now from here, black wants to defend the rook. Of course, knight f6 is no good. White just takes the knight on the f6 square. With that in mind, black's going to have to once again go for the Ben Feingold counterattack with the move f6. And yes, Ben Feingold says never play f6, but here f6 actually a pretty decent move. However, instead of that, Alireza Firouzja does not do that. Instead, queen takes f1 on the board. He literally sacrifices the rook. Oh my goodness, but here Magnus, he does not take the rook right away. No, he plays an unbelievable intermediate move. You know what? Puzzle time. If you're a beginner, good puzzle for you. Pause the video right now and try to find Magnus Carlsen's intermediate move. It's a very strong idea. Did you find it? Okay, the idea here is simply b3. What you want to do is you want to threaten bishop to a3 check, at which point you have the discovered attack on the queen on f1. Okay, from here, Alireza Firouzja, queen to e2. So what's white's idea? Well, he simply goes bishop a3 check anyway, activating the bishop, forcing the king to move, king to e8, and only now does he take the rook on the h8 square. So this idea of b3, bishop a3, he gets two free tempos, and in return, black moves the queen and moves the king. So white here gets some free tempos and still wins the rook on h8 in the end. All right, now because because Magnus won back the exchange, material is even, but Magnus arguably has the stronger minor piece and a safer king, so Magnus has a solid edge here. Now from here, king d7, Alireza, he's running away, trying to protect the knight on the g8 square with the rook. Of course, the queen was attacking it there. Now Magnus, queen takes h7. Magnus is a simple man. He sees a free pawn, he wins a free pawn. Now queen takes f2, same thing for Alireza, and defending the pawn on the f7 square. Now Magnus gives the black king a check, a little tickle check, queen h3 check, king c6, more tickle checks, queen c3, and finally queen to e5. The threat here, of course, queen d6, forcing the king back to the back rank. This can only be good for white. Now here, what are the ideas for black? Well, the best moves, perhaps rook to e8 or even knight to f6. Of course, the f6 square being defended by the queen, so black here has to get those pieces on the back rank back into the game immediately. Well, I say that, but here rook d8 is a good move, but knight f6, that is what Alireza plays in the game, but this actually turns out to be a critical mistake. Here, Magnus Carlsen has the ability to win a piece on the spot. It's a beautiful combination. You know what? Another puzzle. Go ahead and try to solve it before I give the solution away. Pause it right now if you want to. The idea from Magnus is he has to play the move queen to e7 check. The idea is queen c8 is next, and then you play the absolutely disgusting move bishop to d6. All of that is dirty. The idea is you want to threaten queen c7 checkmate, and how the heck is black supposed to defend against it? Well, there are only two ways. One is queen b6, and then Magnus takes the knight. The other way is going to be knight to d8, defending the c7 square with the knight, but once again, Magnus, he simply takes it. So pretty much no matter what black does here, he loses that knight and the game. However, instead, Magnus does not go for this combination here. Instead, queen d6 looks very logical, forcing the king back, but again, he misses the win on the spot. All right, queen c8, queen to f8 check, and now king to d7 from black. The best move, it's complicated, is of course queen to king to c7. However, this is a long game, got a lot to cover, not going into that too much detail. Here, king d7 on the board. Why is king d7 so bad? Well, once again, Magnus has the idea of queen to e7 and then bishop d6, again with the exact same position, winning the knight on the f6 square because mate is threatened on c7. So Magnus missing the winning combination on the spot twice in a row. Oh my goodness. Instead, queen takes f7. I mean, I give this 2 question marks because, I mean, winning a pawn is logical, but here, black, his king actually gets to safety. King to c6. And believe it or not, the king is going to be relatively safe way over here on the queen side. Who would have thought? All right, that is queen e6, another tickle check, and king b5. The king just runs away all the way to the a5 square. Oh my goodness. I bet you didn't see that coming in this game. All right, that is queen to h3. The idea is you're threatening queen c3 check in some lines. However, queen to h3 is another critical mistake by Magnus. Here, Alireza Firouzja has an unbelievable combination. Once again, pause the video if you want to solve this. It's insane. Okay, the idea for Alireza Firouzja is you sacrifice the knight. Knight g4 check, hitting the king. And here, white has a very, very difficult choice to make. The best move is simply king to h1. As here, the winning idea from black is you actually have enough time to retreat the king all the way back to the a7 square, starting with king b6. And from there, you simply bring the rook into the game and you basically win on the spot. Now, what if the white queen takes the knight instead? Queen takes g4. Well, in that case, you actually lose the queen on the spot. Here, the idea, rook to h8. The only move for white is queen h3, and then black starts playing with its food. The disrespect with the move queen f4. That's right, you delay taking on h3 one more move just for the disrespect. Now, king h1, rook takes, g takes, and queen e4, and here black basically wins. The bishop and the rook are no match for the queen on the open board. So, in the end, knight g4, this move here wins on the spot, but Alireza Firouzja, he misses it. Instead, the other knight move is played. He goes for the idea of knight to e4, and believe it or not, this throws away Alireza Firouzja's advantage that he fought for by getting his king to the ludicrous a5 square. From here, Magnus, he turns up the heat. b4, hitting the king. King b6, he runs away. Of course, you do not want to go king to a4 here. I am not going to give you a chance to solve this puzzle because here, queen b3 is checkmate on the spot. And if you missed that, shame on you, my friend. Just kidding, not shame on you. All right, going back here, king b6 is obviously the move. And here, the best idea for Magnus, now the bishop no longer has a future on this diagonal. What you want to do is go bishop b2, and from here, here you are threatening the idea of queen d3 and then bishop d4 check, forking the king and the queen. That would be deadly. However, instead, Magnus in time pressure, queen e3 check. What he wanted to do is get those queens off the board and head towards an endgame. But don't worry, my friend, the endgame here is even more insane than the middle game. And yes, Magnus is still going to checkmate Alireza Firouzja in spectacular fashion. Don't click away, you gotta see this. Alright, from here, queen takes e3, and once again, Magnus adds the disrespect with the intermediate move c5. The idea is he doesn't want to lose that pawn on the c4 square after d takes e3 and then d takes c4. So instead, he adds the disrespect with the move c5 check, the intermediate move. Now queen takes, b takes, king c6. Of course, the pawn was being defended by the bishop on the a3 square. Now from here, Magnus, he has one mission in this game. Force the king back, bring his king over into the game, and then somehow force a brutal checkmate on the back rank. Let's see how it happens. Alright, Magnus, d3, hitting the knight. Rook h8, king g1, knight g3. Now king f2 is forced. Of course, black was threatening rook h1, and then rook takes a1. Magnus demonstrating his sagacity, does not fall for the trick. Now black, knight f5, and Magnus slowly but surely gets his pieces into the game, forcing the king back and rerouting the bishop on this superior diagonal. So far, so good. Now black, rook a4, and Magnus brings his bishop up, and then he starts the legendary king march. Here we go. Alright, Alireza Firouzja trying to check the king, Magnus not caring, and in the end, he goes back to the e3 square, fighting on. Now king d2, king c3, the king marches forward. Alright, Alireza takes the pawn on g2, but Magnus, does he care? No, he does not. He makes way for the king, and it launches up the board to the b4 square, then c4, and then d5. Oh my goodness, are you seeing what I'm seeing here, Chess YouTube? Okay, Alireza, he's not out of the game. King d7, but Magnus, he just presses on king to e6. Oh my goodness, the bishop cuts off this diagonal. The king cuts off d7. White is threatening checkmate. And here, Alireza, all he has to do is find the move b6, opening up the b7 square for the king. But does he find it? No, he does not. King d8, and Magnus, rook to f8 checkmate. The legendary king march, bringing his king over in this way, somehow, some way, to e6, and then delivering the checkmate on f8. Oh my goodness, Magnus Carlsen, what a game.